Welcome, everybody, to No Fear. This is the podcast that takes a look at the boundaries of courage and fear. And what we want to do, our objective, is to take a very close look at fear and how instead of running away from it, we want you to face it. We want you to harness that energy and utilize it to actually be the best version of yourself. So today, I am with two of the co-founders of 3triple7. I'm Pete Pepe. I'm one of the co-founders. And across from me, we have Iiro Seppänen. And directly across from me, we have Jeb Corliss. And the three of us create 3triple7.
And at 3triple7, we're all about passion and inspiration. But in the end, we're just ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things because we've learned how to harness the energy from fear and turn it into courage. And courage is not the absence of fear. It's taking an action despite of it. And today's episode, we're going to talk about risk-taking. And who would be a better person to interview than a legendary wingsuit pilot, base jumper, our brother, Jeb Corliss. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks. This is going to be fun.
I love talking about risk and fear. And
right?
And thank you for, we invited you to your show, but it's at your home. So thank you for inviting our home for us to set up the podcast.
No problem. And just a little disclaimer. Usually if we're laughing and we're talking about death, we're not making fun of it.
I am.
Or Jeb. Yeah. I being the normal.
So what Pete is saying, we're talking about serious subjects, but we don't take it so seriously. And today is a risk. And I used to be a base jumper. I got injured. You continued to carry the torch of the most dangerous sport for so long. So when I evaluated my own risk, I had to make an equation that it was how much it cost and plus how likely I would get hurt and injured versus how much fun it is and would I potentially get paid. And then I start figuring out whether it's something to do or not. Mm-hmm. So what's your equation for risk like when you're dealing with the most dangerous sports and the activities that you do?
Oh, man. Risk is a very complex topic because it's very different for different people. And different people see things as risky. And understanding what the actual risks can sometimes be very complicated, especially when dealing with something like base jumping. Base jumping is very, very dangerous. And a lot of people actually try to pretend that it's not as dangerous as it is. So they're actually not actually calculating risk properly. They're pretending it's actually safe, which it's not. And then somehow that convinces them that they can do this. And that's why they do this. And I think that's kind of it's an approach that some people take because that's what they have to do in order to do it. I don't really respect that approach so much. My approach is I understand the risks involved, how dangerous it is. In base jumping's case, because that's really what I have, my forte and what I do, is the base jumping kills people. And you have to understand that. And you have to accept that that is the ultimate risk of what this particular activity is. So in order to do the activity, you have to accept the worst case scenario of what could happen, which is dying, right? And then there's a lot of gray all the way up to being successful, which is you can get hurt, you can get arrested, it can destroy you financially, it can destroy you psychologically. It's a very it's a difficult thing to explain to people like, okay, well, why are you willing to take on a risk that's that serious, that's that severe, that can end your life? Like it's pretty much an unjustifiable thing to do something that can kill you. And it's hard to say, okay, well, that's worth the risk. It's worth dying for, so for me, I started base jumping when I was 21. I saw it when I was 16. And for me, the only way I could work through the risk that was involved was to, the reality is I'd suffered from a serious psychological disorder. That's really what it comes down to. So I, at 16 years old, suffered from depression, suffered from a deep sadness, a deep darkness that was consuming and crushing me. So I was going to die. And that's what was coming. I could not survive in this world. I wasn't built for this world. I wasn't meant to survive. I was one of these people who I wasn't going to make it. I was a 16-year-old who was not going to make it. So the only way you can really justify taking a risk that can kill you is if that risk could potentially save you. And I think that that's really kind of how it worked for me. Is I was suffering from a condition that was going to kill me, which was basically my own mind. My own mind didn't want to be here. I didn't want to exist. I didn't want to live. I didn't want to exist. I suffered from I felt like I was living in a very dark place, and I had no light. I had no vision. I had no future. I had no hope. I had no desires. I had nothing. I wanted nothing. And it's really difficult to describe that place and that thought and that being to people who've never experienced it, because it doesn't make sense. And me now as a 48-year-old looking back at that 16-year-old depressed teenager, it's hard for even me now to like connect to him. I don't understand him so much. But what I do know is that when I saw base jumping, the very fact that it could kill me was not a negative. That wasn't something I saw as, oh, that's bad. I saw that as, oh, well, you know, I watched a person base jump and it struck me and I decided I want to do that. And it's perfect for me because if I succeed, then I will have done something that very few human beings in this world would be willing to do because they care about their lives and they want to live. If I die while doing it, then I get released from my suffering on the planet. So for me, either way, I win. So the calculus of risk for me was, the risk was to not do it.
It's almost like base jumping became your life jacket, that you're like a lifesaver in that sense. So it's interesting to see the risk from that perspective.
You guys bring up a good point, I think, from I don't want to say normal person. I want to say as a common person that doesn't base jump or that has never been in that extreme sport. I think there's always that misconception, or at least a perception from the general public, of this recklessness, where you're endangering yourself. You know, these people are crazy. Base jumpers are always labeled as like lunatics.
Yeah.
And people that are suicidal. And there's all this just misconception, I think. And of course, knowing you guys for such a long time, I have a little bit of insight into that misconception of what the normal audience thinks of it. Because that recklessness always comes up. You hear base jumping, you hear reckless and risk takers. And
I guess the best way to describe it is I don't think it's necessarily a misconception. Because it's hard for me to tell you what other people's motivations are and what other people think or why they do the things they do. I can't tell you why other people base jump. I can only really tell you from my own perspective and me. And there's no question that when I came into it, I came in, and you have to remember, this is a 30-plus year journey that I went through. So in the beginning, reckless would be a great description of me. You know, and suicidal would be a great description of me. A person who wanted destruction and annihilation and the ending of my suffering is a great way to describe what I was. That's what brought me in. And what happened is I was suffering from something psychologically that I needed to cope with. And I didn't know how. I didn't know what to do. So what I did is I used extreme experience as like a coping mechanism to deal with a mind that was literally trying to crush me. Like my own mind was trying to destroy me. So in order to do that, I decided to put my mind through such horrendous horror and fear that it kind of like was like shock therapy to myself. Like I always say it, like my mind was on fire. Like I had this raging, burning inferno inside my mind. And what I was doing was whenever I would do a really super dangerous thing, take a really intense risk, I would set a little fire break to kind of try to hold the fire back. So when the fire got there, it would stop. And it worked. And the more intense it got, the more extreme it got, the more risk I took, right? And the more possibility for complete annihilation that I put myself through, those fire breaks got bigger. And it's hard to understand, but this is over time, right? So a 16-year-old child who is suffering from serious depression and isn't going to make it, right? Has no hopes, future, anything. And then all of a sudden finds something that's off in the distance that he has to work for. Like people don't just give you base jumping. Like you don't just get that. You have to work for it. You have to train for it. You have to prepare for it. And in order for people to take you seriously, you can't come off suicidal. You can't come off like a crazy person because no one will come anywhere near you. So you have to start trying to be normal, like trying to think normal and trying to speak normal and trying to and it's fascinating because on the journey, like to base jumping, I actually found happiness and I found purpose and I found my life. And it's a strange thing, but in my search for death, I found my life. And base jumping, actually, it's almost a strange paradox idea, but base jumping saved me. There's no question. Yeah. Doing all this really dangerous stuff and taking these extreme risks is what made me find purpose in my life and gave me something, like it gave me a reason to get up off my couch and go out in the world and do something.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting though, when we're talking about fear and we're talking about courage, the fact that you're an individual that does not use alcohol, does never use drugs. And the fact that most, I think, troubled teens back then or today in this day and age would be strung out on heroin, or they're taking whatever drug they need to numb themselves or whatever it is. And the fact that you were able to take something that's so fearful. I mean, I've been with you guys where I've walked to the edge, or shall I say crawled to the edge of an 800-foot cliff, and I'm scared to shitless thinking I'm going to get blown off the edge of it. And you guys are dancing around on the side of it, where you've basically been able to harness your fears and turn that energy into something positive. Yeah. And that to me is extremely powerful.
Well, you know, what's kind of interesting is I went from being a reckless, chasing my own mortality type person, that by the time I actually got to base jumping, like I actually started I'd gone through my skydiving training and I'd gotten enough jumps to actually go through a base jumping course and actually start base jumping. I was no longer suicidal at that stage. So we're talking from 16 to 21, right? 22, I started really base jumping. But by that stage, I was a different person. And then all of a sudden, I started doing risk evaluation. Because now I didn't want to die anymore. Like I actually wanted to live. So it became this, all of a sudden death was no longer an acceptable outcome, right? I did not want to die, right? Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't understand that I could still die. Like things can still go wrong. It's still super dangerous. It didn't get any safer just all of a sudden because my mindset changed. It's still every bit as dangerous. But in order to succeed in something that was so high risk and so dangerous and so, can end your life with one mistake, I had to get really calculated with how I would accept risk, what risks I was willing to accept. And I needed to understand the risks. And that came from the experience of the training. And then I started realizing that through training, you start eliminating variables, right? So there's lots of variables involved in a base jump and lots of things that can go wrong. And that's why it's so dangerous. There's very small margins for error, and any one of those errors can cause massive injuries or death. So that's what you do, is you find out what those are and you start slowly eliminating them or learning to control them and training for them.
Well, I just think, again, that's all amazing. I for some reason, I'm still hooked on trying to kind of dig inside your head about the fact that you were able to harness your fear. We know so many people, fearful of walking outside. People have a fear of asking someone out on a date. Whatever that fear or that phobia is, the fact that you went to the extreme, you almost found your greatest fear, which I think is a fear of heights for people, like is something that's so fucking scary. Like put someone at the top of Kuala Lumpur, whatever buildings you guys are jumping off of. Yeah. People would be shitting themselves. Literally, we've seen videos of people grabbing things, like to freaking out. So to take a fear like that and turn it into such a powerful tool, and I think it's something, obviously, like, have you been able to utilize that fear and that tool, which is courage, right? Because you guys both explain to me all the time, there is no courage without fear.
Well, no. Right? Well, it's funny because a lot of people think that courageous people aren't scared of stuff. That's the opposite. I mean, if you're not scared of something, it doesn't take courage to do it. Quite literally, the only way you can have courage is by doing something that you're fearful of, something that frightens you, something that is scary. That's what courage is doing that, like pushing through that. And for me, it's complicated because I was suffering so much psychologically that facing fear, it was almost therapeutic. So I was drawn to it. I was diagnosed earlier in life with a condition called counterphobia, which means that if something frightened me or scared me, I was drawn towards it. And it's a kind of rare condition because people don't usually survive with it. Because it draws you.
Is it a real condition? Like, I've been trying to Google it and I haven't found much support.
It's funny. I don't know. All I know is the one time I went to a psychologist, that's what they said. And when they said it to me, my response was, no shit, I've just been telling you for the last hour that's what I do.
Okay, if you listeners, if it's a real condition,
check,
Google
please.
us, leave it in the comments.
check.
Jeff has been telling for years that he has counterphobia. I've been Googling for years, but I haven't seen anything for it. So,
anyways, that's what I was told. But again, is it a true condition? I have no idea.
but it sounds cool. Like, let's see if it is true.
Well, I'll tell you what it is. Whether it's true or not, it describes what I was going through, right? It describes the fact that when things frightened me or scared me, it drew me towards it. So, I did a lot of truly horrific things that genuinely, and this is the odd thing is I have felt fear on levels that are crippling. Like, I've been so terrified. You were there when I jumped the Palace Hotel.
Yeah, your legs were shaking and you had all the physical symptoms of fear, and you still went ahead. That's what I was admiring. Like, I chickened out from that jump. So we had gone to New York on a purpose of like jumping out of a window of a hotel.
That's
it sounded like a good idea when we get there. And then I saw like Jeb like shivering and going like, like Jeb has always been like a few steps ahead of me. And if he shows those symptoms, I know like, oh, this is gonna kill me.
Wait,
like,
so
I mean,
you tapped onto something good. I'm going to ask both of you guys this. This goes back to, so we'll take that as an example for the weighing the risks of something, or measuring the risks, the risk taken, the risk versus reward. Like, there's the perfect example. So, Jeb, how did you gauge it? And then you said, fuck it.
Yeah, well, he's a test dummy. He's like my canary person. So if he starts going like those physical fears, I know, okay, I got to check out on that. And I've done it a few times, which is always like, when you ask about recklessness in the beginning and the risk-taking. So yeah, as a base jumpers, we've been reckless and we've been taking crazy risk in that sense. But like Jeb said, we built ourselves. We kind of started to take baby steps to prepare ourselves. But usually, I'm a big like speaker for risk taking, and I always believe that the entire evolution of humankind have been tied to those people who have been taking those risks and asked the bold questions and taking the first steps. So in that sense, like, people like to box in their head whether it's base jumping, it's a risk taker, all risk taking is back. But I'm such a firm believer that we should take risks because it helps us to grow and it helps us to expand our comfort zone.
Dude, beyond that, we would never have crossed oceans if we didn't have risk takers. We never would have been the people who climbed massive mountains to see what was on their side. We never would have had people put themselves in little metal tubes and shoot themselves into space. I mean, the reality is that the risk takers are the ones who push the human species forward. And a lot of the risks these people take, at the time they're taking them, normal people around them are like, what are you doing? They can't see the vision. And that's the thing, is even with base jumping and the risks that Iiro and I were taking, it was very difficult for people who weren't involved to wrap their head around why a person would do something like that. And again, for me, my motivations were, and it's kind of funny because at the time, I didn't fully understand my own psychology. I was kind of acting out of almost unconsciously. Like, I was doing these things without fully grasping why I was doing them. And I didn't start fully understanding the reason or the motivation or the purpose, why I was willing to sacrifice my life for it until recently. I mean, I literally wrote a book about my life. And in the process of writing that book, I had to start looking at my life and looking at the things that I did and trying to understand so I could explain. Like, I'm trying to explain to others, this is why I'm doing this. And in the process of trying to explain it, all of a sudden I started realizing, I'm insane. I mean, that literally the only genuine explanation was I was suffering from a serious psychological disorder that I was trying to cope with. And it's a weird thing because crazy people don't know they're crazy, right? So all of a sudden to realize, oh my God, I'm crazy. Like, it was a very interesting thing to dawn on me. And we're talking about risk. This whole thing is about risk. And I thought that I was being calculated. And I thought that I was, doing the proper training and the proper preparation and that I was, doing this like balancing act of, risk versus reward and, and understanding what the risks were. But there were many instances where I knew that what I was doing was going to kill me. And I still stepped forward. Wow. And you're
still here.
Well, I survived. Again, that's a lot of luck. There's a shit ton of luck involved in what we do.
Right. I want to make sure we circle back. First of all, what is the name of your book? I've seen the cover, but just so for people out there that do not know, he wrote a phenomenal book. So I was just like,
Memoirs from the Edge, exploring the line between life and death. And it's funny because it really, I thought when I started writing the book, I thought, I'm going to write about my adventures around the world, base jumping and stuff. And then I realized, I've done thousands and thousands of jumps. There's like 5 jumps in this book. It's really not about base jumping at all. And I realized what it was. And another thing is I had, out of thousands of jumps, I've only been hurt like 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
The only ones that matter are the ones where I got hurt. And that's what was so interesting is that in this risk calculus, right, you're always trying not to get hurt. Like that's the goal. You're trying to get in there and get out and not get injured. But as it turns out, my failures, the mistakes that I made ended up being the most important things that happened to me. And I think a lot of people are so terrified of a failure or making a mistake, and they don't realize that those are the things that actually make you learn. Those are the things that make you grow. And for me, I had little injuries. So if I let's say I broke my ankle, I've broken both ankles 4 times each. If I broke my ankle and it was only 6 weeks recovery, I didn't learn shit. It didn't have any impact on me. But if I got injured and it took a year to recover and I was suffering, I couldn't sit in a movie theater and it hurt to sit in a chair and I had to learn to walk again and I had to use a bedpan. I spent months in a hospital. That was different.
It's just the grind, everyday grind that reminds you of that.
It's the suffering. It's the pain and the suffering. And when you're going through the pain and suffering, you grow in a way that I could never have gotten to where I am right now psychologically had I not gone through that suffering and pain. It has nothing to do with the injury. It has nothing to do with even the jumping. It has to do with I went through something that hurt me in a way that literally cracked me in my core. And I think a lot of for myself, I was literally trying to burn myself down, this whole concept of burning myself to the ground so I can rebuild myself into what I wanted. There's this idea of the strongest metal is hammered the hardest. So I just basically hammered the shit out of myself. and I just kept hammering and hammering and hammering until eventually, and again, this episode's about risk and we're talking about risk. And me, a lot of people are like, well, you're the best one to talk about this. Maybe not. Because I had a very unhealthy relationship with risk for most of my life.
Right.
And only now am I really fully grasping that the risks that I was taking were unjustifiable. You cannot justify it at all. There's no justification. But what I can say is in base jumping and in what I was doing, I don't fucking have to justify myself.